So in Hazinu, we have Shichet Lo Banav Muma. They desecrated to him. They are not his son. They are certainly not his sons. Or Shichet Lo. They desecrated not to him. They desecrated something else, even worse. So which one is it? And we define the pshat by the pauses that the notes imply. So Shichet Lo is a merchat tevir. Tevir has a pause afterwards. So Shichet Lo goes together. They sinned to him. They desecrated to him. Lo banav mumam. They're not his sons. So that's how we define the pshat. We derive a drash from the fact that Shichet Lo still exists in Torah. So that phrase is there, and we concede the concept that this is an overloaded piece of text. It tells us both things. But if we want to know what the simple answer is, the simple answer is defined by the pauses of the music as it gives us those pauses. And that is defined in the flow of the flow that's defined by reading the notes together. This perush is not that. This perush is each note was given Torah L'Moshe Sinai, and therefore each note has a special implication, and it's ours to try to divine what that special implication was. And hopefully we trust that the implications that are found in other midrashim and other sources can be found to match what the notes impose on each word. We're going to go on. 10:4, Uvenei. So remember last pasuk, the Uvenei had a tipcha, which stood it alone and told us that we're defining each of the sons from here on in based on their geography and their characteristics. Now we've got Uvenei with a mercha. Mercha is going to likely be connected to what's come from before, but mostly push us forward into what's going to go afterwards. So why is this one different? 10:4, number 1, and sons of. Gomer was mainly represented by his son Ashkenaz, and sons of another branch of Yefet made significant progress as referred backwards to the previous sentence by the directional shape of the reading mark. So even though the other brothers from the last pasuk were the main influences, there were still other things that were contributed by the other sons, other elements of the world as we have here, were defined by the cousins of the first group that we mentioned. We're lightly connected, but we're moving forward in a different direction from what this other group managed to define into the world. So that's why the last one had a tipcha, last pasuk, because we're saying the fact that they're sons, that gives them something special. Now, these are sons that have a little bit of what was before, but mostly it's going forward. So that's why we see one started with a mercha, and one started with a tipcha, now we've got one with a mercha. Yavan with a tipcha, so this is going to close off the phrase and look backwards to the concept that we've just defined. Number 2, also Yavan made important contributions in the area of beauty and utility, although he was physically inferior to his older brother, as shown by the directional shape of the reading mark. So certainly the concepts that Greece tried to impose on the world involve both almost deitization of the concepts of beauty and the fruition of architectural and military skills. Despite that, he does look back towards the sons of the older brother, and he doesn't quite match up. So that's why he gets a tipcha. It goes to what's come from before, and it closes off the idea. Elisha. So now we've talked about the father. We're going to talk about his sons now. So of course, between the one generation and the other generation, there's a sharp demarcation. So we have a Munach, which has a sharp demarcation and moves forward from there. Elisha, number 3. His oldest son Elisha preferred the charm of the landscape of hills, valleys, and seashore. He settled on the island of Cyprus, see Ezra 27:7, which was in a relative close distance by sea, as stressed by the shape of the reading mark. So he is in a place that is separate, i.e., he's on an island. I'm just trying to see how he gets the idea of close distance by sea. So we're going to go to Tarshish. He's going to be connected to the next son afterwards. V'Tarshish, number 4. So this is an etnachta. This is something that's going to give us stability with a little bit of a pause afterwards, and it's perhaps going to have something elevated implied in the definition of what this son did. By his position in the birth order, another son had colonized a distant area, and Tarshish went further to the west by sea and finally settled on 2 islands of Corsica and Sardinia. Trey, 2, Shaish. But I don't know what Shaish means.
Shaish means marble or rock.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So two rocky islands, as denoted by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So again, he finds for himself a place that is relatively safe and isolated from threat around himself. So he finds 2 hard places to live, 2 rocky countries, where he can again have stability and flourish. And alternatively, Tar Shaish, instead of Trey, instead of 2, Tar may also indicate southern Italy with 2 volcanic tips, Calabria and Sicily, or Etna and Vesuvius. So two peaks of rocks, 2 high points. So we're saying it might be the peaks of 2 volcanoes instead of the number 2. We're more defining it by the concept of mountainous. Kitim with a tikha. So this is going to cause us to look backwards towards what's come from before and have a pause after it. Number 5, the descendants of the 4th son were called Kitim. They have chosen picturesque islands of the Mediterranean, Crete and the Greek islands, establishing local communities that were stretched out on the eastern part of the sea by spots of land. Ketum is a spot, Ketum, as specified by the relationship to Tarshish through the directional shape of the reading mark. So again, Tikha is going to focus us back. So because Tarshish settled on mountainous islands, Kitim is also going to settle on mountainous islands, and they are going to again give him an isolated place because he's got the Tikha that looks backwards to the concept of Tarshish, but then has a pause afterwards. Vidodanim, number 6, with Sof Pasuk. We have a note still after Kitim, and B, because of the multiple islands, their name is plural, Kitim. So again, the name that we see biblically is not always the name that a person would have been known by. It is more a definition of a feature that we want to know about them or that is important about them. So we see a name that's pluralized, so there must be a concept of something pluralized implied by this name to those particular people. Vidodanim, 6, and Dodanim, consisting of the youngest sons of Yavan and his descendants, have centered mostly in and around the island of Rhodes. Dodanim, Rodanim. So again, we see that names sometimes get deterioration with time and local pronunciation. So roads and dodes. So that's the definition. And again, because they're on an island, they are standing alone, and they are in a distinct position. And certainly historically, they stood against parts of the rest of the empire. So again, we're going to read the pasuk, and we're going to notice that the father Yavan is separated out from the children, and that Kittim is going to sort of stand a little bit alone, and Dodanim is going to stand a little bit alone, and Elisha and Tarshish are going to sort of run together. And again, this is because of the relationships between them, and the physical separations between them. Uvnei Yavan, Elisha v'Tarshish, Kittim v'Dodanim. We are on the next page, page 103. Bereshit Yud, Pasuk Hey, Genesis 10, sentence 5. Me'eleh. This is a Tlisha Gdola. Tlisha Gdola always finds its place at the beginning of the word, and it brings us back to things that have happened before. So if we have a Tlisha Gdola and the accent is on another syllable rather than the first syllable, then you'll see that the word will have a second Tlisha Gdola that goes over the accented syllable. Similarly, Tlisha Ktana always comes at the end of the word, and if the previous syllable will have the accent, then we'll get a second Tlisha Ktana coming earlier. Me'eleh, from these, and this is a note of emphasis. So it'll give us an emphasis on the word and pause slightly afterwards. From these descendants of Yefet, various clans have originated and eventually diversified in specific ways, in spite of the fact that all of them had a common background, as indicated by the shape and placement of the reading mark. So from these, even though they had something from before that is common to them, they're all going to stand alone. They're going to be emphasized, and we're going to pause afterwards. So each of these has its own separate existence and difference, even though they had common roots and the ability to perhaps stay more uniform. They did not. Nifredu. This is a ger shayim. We haven't had a ger shayim in a while. Ger shayim is a doubled note. It emphasizes the word, and again, it has a pause afterwards. Were spread, number 2. With the increase of their population, they were spread extensively, occupying more and new neighboring territories, as shown by the reverse double directional shape of the reading mark. So because it's a double note, we're going to say that they went to multiple places. And again, it's going to look backwards. So this is sort of like an azla. It's a note that looks backwards. There are 2 of them next to each other. So they're going to look backwards. Their separation is going to be part of what defines them and allows them to stand separate, like we said in the Me'eleh. Iyeh, this is a mapach. Mapach is something that collects things from before and focuses it sharply into a different reality that's going to go afterwards. So we're going to look at what had happened from before, and we're going to take a single characteristic or a single feature, and we're going to bring that forward. Iyeh, islands of, number 3. Thus were all islands of the region inhabited, their topographical conditions and natural predispositions having influenced the residents to adopt certain occupations, rituals, laws, and concepts as stressed by the shape of the reading mark. So their position in the world is going to influence the way and the features that they look going forward. So because they settled in that place, they're going to be people who are good at climbing mountains. They're going to be people who are good at growing things on the rocks. They're going to be good seafarers. So we're going to sweep forward the concepts of all of these different places that people have chosen to settle, and that is going to define their reality from here on in. Those features are going to then become essential elements of these people, and it's going to separate them out. It's going to move them forward because of those geographical places that they have chosen. Hagoyim with a pashta. Pashta is going to slightly emphasize the word and focus us to look forward onto what's going to come afterwards. The nations, number 4. Due to the deepening individual differences of each place, separate sovereignties emerged in every locale, identified as the nations of respective countries, as denoted by the directional shape of the reading mark. So their nationhood is going to make us look forward to what they are going to do, what they're going to accomplish in the future, and they are going to stand recognized as nations. So that's why we have, again, a note that's on the top of a word, tells us that there is going to be something good that comes from that. Be'artzotam, this is the katon, so this is that double note. It's going to tell us that there's perhaps more than one element to the influence that this note is going to have on the word, and perhaps something better and something worse. On their land, number 5. Also, those who occupied solid territories on their land to the north have expanded by continuation, steadily occupying new positions, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So those people who were on land and not on islands continue to expand from that original base to other places. And we have, again, the concept of the original and the later. And we always give perhaps a higher significance to the original. So that's why we have these people who settled in one place and then spread to somewhere else. They have a better place and somewhere else that they went. So again, that's how we get that double definition to the places that they eventually spread to. Ish tikha, this is going to focus us back on what's come from before and pause slightly afterwards. Each one in his own location develops specific onomatopoetic expressions, various accents and intonations which have contributed to local dialects, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So each of them is going to take the features of where they have decided to settle, and usually I'm struggling a little bit with his definition of ish as each. Usually what he does is he takes the word in isolation and defines it in isolation, even if it doesn't make sense in the entire pasuk, in the entire sentence, because each word is supposed to stand alone. And here he's chosen to use the definition that we would impose on it by the structure of the whole sentence. So I'm not quite sure why ish, which should be defined as man, got the phrase of each here. And
I think it implies singularity because everywhere else it refers in plural. These are all plural words, and then at what comes after it is they're also plural words. Ish Lashono is the only
but again,
singular.
what we're trying to do is we're trying to separate out each word that has a note and allow it to stand alone and to be defined alone. So Um, I would have thought that to be consistent, it should have said a man. And I'm not gonna dwell on the point too much, but I think that's a peculiarity, and that might be something that he took from somewhere else rather than considering the point to its full detail. Although there might be a reason that he chose to do this here. The other fact that I'm going to mention is when we see the word ish in Torah, usually it means a man of importance, not just a man. So a person of importance, a personage. So again, that certainly fits into the concept that we're trying to imply with this word. That each one of them was not only a Mr. Nobody, a particular man, a man in a crowd. He was an important man, a man of influence, a man who certainly defined part of the world that lives on after him.
Prototype for nation.
When did your father write this?
In the 1970s.
He's using a lot of literature deconstruction, this idea of taking words for what the word means. Right? It's even deeper than that because it goes to Tamim, which are almost like a subset of the word.
Jeff has opened eyes to lots and lots of Pirushim that by virtue of this approach it gives you a completely different understanding of a pasuk than you come to know or expect. That's fascinating.
So we'll go on other than to say this is a tipcha, so it focuses us back on all of the things that we've said before, that each of them are going to different places, that the geographies are defining their characteristics, and each one of them is going to stand alone, is going to have a pause after himself to say that he stood alone based on the features that geography and his place of dwelling imposed on him and eventually imposed on the world afterwards. Lil shono, for his tongue, with the stabilizing etnachta. Each community built up its own vocabulary and a pleasant way for its tongue to convey individual emotions through song, poetry, art, architecture, etc., as suggested by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So, the language, its tongue, defined the nicer part of each of the cultures that eventually came out of this. Le mishpechotam tipcha. As Sue pointed out, most of the words in this sentence are plural. Only ish lil shono is the single phrase. And again, we're coming back to the plural phrase here for their families. Tipcha, this is going to sweep us back into what's come forward and pause slightly afterwards. They established a duty for their families and their descendants to continue the adopted traditions, customs, rituals as national characteristics of ideological tendencies and concepts. Even legends connected with certain localities had a purpose to boost a relationship with given places or build up the spirit of chauvinism as expressed by the reverse direction of the reading mark. So again, your family association is going to be defined by your geographical location and what that imposes on you in terms of a language, and eventually that is going to spill out into the multiple cultures that make up the world now. Begoyehem, by their nations, with Sof Pasuk, which again is going to give us stability here. Although various peoples seem to differ radically by their nations, culture and language by tracing similar phenomenon, primitive expressions, stem words. So stem, plain words. A parallel correspondence may be found, indicating a common origin. So again, this is a word that's standing all by itself, because there's the tikha with a pause before it, and there's a sof pasuk afterwards. So the concept of a nation is somebody who's got something that's specific to them that stands separate from everything that's around them. They have a way of defining themselves that is sharply demarcated, or demarcated at least, from what else is around them. So we're going to we've got one more note, MB. Germany and Greece can serve as an example. Although those countries are in diametrically opposite positions in Europe, far apart from one another, they have common characteristics in their linguistic structure, although lacking phonetic similarity. There is a prevalence of substantive verbs. Moreover, as in German, each letter or word can be transferred to a noun by the addition of a preposition das. This property is also common to other branches of the original language. So too is a linguistic fusion part of this principle. So when you read German words, quite often what you will do is you will take various concepts or various words and you will put them all together. So you can get very large compound words in German that's just taking this thought and that thought and that thought and putting them all together.
That or the author falls asleep at the keyboard and just kind of leaning on different keys and that came out. If I can, sorry, go ahead.
So we're gonna read the pasuk, and when we read the pasuk, we're gonna notice that me'ela, the word from these, and nifredu, those two words stand alone by themselves. And similarly, milshono, language is going to stand by itself. Lemishpachotam, the family is going to stand by itself, and the nation is going to stand by itself. So what we're saying is that there is definition both in terms of the individuals, the way the individuals relate to each other, the way they relate to those around them with a similar concept, and the way they stand alone in the world. So each of these features, we'll notice, has a pause before it and a pause after it. So each of these things is going to stand alone in defining the future for these individuals, groups, and nations. Me'ele nifredu iye hagoyim be'artzotam ish milshono lemishpachotam begoyim.
What's interesting to me in this construct is that, one of the problems we have in modern history is there's so much national strife in the post-World War I, post-World War II world, because the bureaucrats, the day we created the map, did so based upon geography. Oh, this river will split this into one nation or the other, ignoring the familial ties that this was focusing on. And there's some fresh thinking about maybe we need to reconfigure nation states based upon the tribes of the different people who live, and create, there'll be more stability by doing it that way, like creating what used to be, for example, Yugoslavia, right? So just 27 different provinces under one nominal government, but really giving independence to each individual, because that's how they see their natural regions, right? And that functional construct might work better than what we have today. But again, focusing more on family than on a national border.
Which again is a good concept, but it's near impossible to implement in practice, because you have a city with 30% this and 70% that. What do you do? Because ethnic cleansing is not a good thing. You move here, you move there. Not a good thing.
Who is dividing up these territories? Who said, okay, you go have that island, and you can go have that volcano? And
back then?
Yeah.
It was wide open.
So, what we certainly define is, we define the world being split up into 70 nations based on the descendants of Noah, all of his grandchildren. And each one of them had a reason each of the fathers had a reason to go in a particular direction, and then each of the sons had to stake out or chose to stake out their own claim, either to stay connected to other of his brothers, or specifically to stay separate and to lay claim to something that he could call his own. And we are trying to, by defining the names in terms of either geographical features or characteristics or so on, say how that eventually influenced the way that these single groups and families would later define